you. Hey! I got you, right?
Mm-hmm.
That mirror, you gotta make it show.
Right here, Eddie. What the freak? You sound like an idiot.
That mirror. Hey!
Oppressor on the track.
We're not black Jews, we're not Jewish, we're not adherents to Judaism, the tenets of Judaism. We're practitioners of spirituality versus religion. They can make all kind of exceptions and creative immigration rules that allow for Ukrainians and all others to come in. But when it comes to those of African ancestry, we seem to be the target of very, very crafty wording and loopholes that define us on the outside.
Some of the different communities. And I think we're going to try.
Who do they think is going anywhere without their babies? Like, I had a breastfeeding baby. When I received the letter, my child was 5 months old. And it was like, oh yeah, so you gotta go. So what's supposed to happen with my babies? Like, I have a 5-year-old, a 3-year-old, and a baby at the time. What's supposed to happen with my children?
They would study outside, sitting on rocks, in the cold, in the heat, and it forced us to establish our own institution. The establishment of the state of Israel was based on the fact that Israel is the ancestral home of the Jewish people, right? Or the people of the Bible, or the people of the book. We identify as being part of that people as well. And so we came back home by divine calling like a lot of other people did. What is the reason why? We are the only people who have not been accepted after 50 plus years in Israel. That's something that nobody can be able to explain. Why?
I came here for a visit in 1995. I really enjoyed the love, the spirit of oneness that was here in our community in Israel. Coming from America, I just knew that this was the place that I wanted to have children and raise my children.
In 1998, Tovit picked up her entire life in America and moved to Dimona, a small town in southern Israel. Now she's lived here for over 2 decades, has had all of her 8 children here, but soon they may all be forced to leave.
April, I received a letter of deportation with my name on it, as well as all of my children's names. At that time, we were given 60 days. And we were told we would be deported from the land of Israel.
Tovit and her family are some of 51 Black Hebrew Israelites slapped with deportation orders in April. Now, they're fighting to stay in Israel. Black Hebrew Israelites are a community of Black Americans who believe that the West Africans brought over to the Americas during the transatlantic slave trade had belonged to one of the lost tribes of Israel, and that their mission is to one day return to the land they say they were expelled from.
We wanted to find out where our roots lie, and our roots lie here. And our ancestral homeland we consider to be here, literally here in southern Judea. So that's how we identify as Jewish, because we're Judeans. We live here, and we say that that's our tribal affiliation.
Around the early 1970s, Black Hebrew Israelites began trickling into Israel on tourist visas, where they established an urban kibbutz known as the Village of Peace in Dimona. Neither Israel nor any of the state's religious bodies recognize Black Hebrew Israelites as Jewish, disqualifying them from citizenship under the law of return. Agreements have been reached over time, allowing members of the community to gain long-term resident status in return for children serving in the IDF. Now, the Dimona community is thriving 3,000 members strong, but not everyone is reaping the benefits.
We really had wanted to get some resolution on their cases, but we never were able to get the cooperation because different governments came in and it was such a hot potato, nobody wanted to deal with it, so they kicked it up the road. And so when the Ministry of Interior signed or sent the letters to these individuals, it was like, why are you doing this now? And all of a sudden they wanted to act as if they had discovered us, you know, discovered these brothers and sisters living here, and we had let them know that they were living here.
Unlike Tovit, this Dimona resident didn't find the Black Hebrew Israelite community. She was born into it.
I was born and raised in Israel. I was taken to the States against my will at the age of 14 by my parents, of course. And ever since I left, I always wanted to make it back.
After moving to the United States with her parents at 14, she only had one dream: make it back to Israel.
When my feet stepped here, I was free. I was like, I'm home, this is it, I can move.
Now, she and her American husband live in Dimona with their 6 children, where they keep Shabbat, observe all the Jewish holidays, and follow the Torah.
We maintain those particular disciplines, especially the spiritual 10 laws. Thou shalt not kill, thou shalt not steal, thou shalt not commit adultery, thou shalt honor thy mother and father. These are tenets that we live by, you know, that govern ourselves.
As families fight their deportation orders, parents say even if they lose, they will not take their children to the United States, where they say racism and violence make it impossible to live freely, even though their children's movements in Israel remain severely restricted into adulthood. Akimiel was born into Israel without any legal status, working odd jobs to pay the bills, and watching his peers live his dream of joining the IDF.
I had a few lawyers, and we was trying to get me into the army, into the military. I decided I wanted to be a pilot. The same day my teacher told me, I'm not gonna be what I want, I said, I'm gonna be a pilot, and I walked out the class. I left. On my graduation day, I definitely had to express myself to that teacher, but I'm still on my way.
All 51 cases are set to be tried separately, where each slated deportee will argue for their right to stay in Israel.
Do you know what you're going to do if you lose the court cases?
I'm going to live. I'm going to live. I mean, if that is the next chapter on our journey as a family, we're gonna, you know, we'll deal with it.
It's a matter of if I have to spend money, or whatever the case is, the years, the time, I'm willing to do it.
In 8th grade, I decided nobody is gonna stop me. And this is my home. Like, this is all I know. It's all I know.
Just a motherfucker get along. I gotta kiss the girl's ass. Bent over, backwards ass nigga, shit. I wish I would kiss this motherfucker world's ass. Just a motherfucker get along. I gotta kiss the girl's ass just to get along. They ain't got no love for us. God made me black and strong, so I ain't gotta kiss this world ass just to get along. It's that old nigga, so to see, for the city of Dayton. And I gotta kiss Satan's ass world just to get along. Cause God made me black and strong. So listen to the song, got an unsung ghetto hero. It's a damn shame. I gotta pack a pistol everywhere that I go. Label me psycho maniac, cause I can't act all bluesy. Nigga lose me with that self-hate. My music come to innovate the underdog. I got big black balls to say fuck all y'all who talk that shit in politics about a real nigga behind my back. Cause I'm black and outspoken. I'm the spirit of Malcolm X, not the token. Motherfucker like Al Sharpton. I'm the fucking shark in the fucking water. Coming up for air cause Willow Wobess. So motherfucker, I don't care what you peasants motherfuckers say about me. Bitch nigga, I never kiss a nigga's ass just to get along. Fuck Satan's world, I never kiss a nigga's ass just to get along. This God made me black and strong, strong. I ain't gotta kiss this world ass to get along. This God made me black and strong, 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 strong. Yes, black family. This is Underground Warrior TV. No, I don't stand with Israel. I never stand with nobody who don't stand with black people. You don't stand with African people, I don't know you. I can't stand with the oppressor of my people. Did you know that black people in Israel are subjected to the highest form of racism? Yes, indeed, where they want to deport black people who live in Israel. We have an identity crisis. You want to be an Israelite, but you want to live near your oppressor. You know these are some racist people. Yes, Israel. What is that book, the Talmud book, the Hebrew Bible, the Torah? In Hebrew, they talk about the enslavement of the African, and we was cursed through Ham. They made this nonsense up, and you black people, you read from the same book that's been tampered with by the Romans, the Greeks, and these Jewish people. And this is why religion doesn't work for the black man and the woman. I talked to a Muslim yesterday. Islam has fried his mind. He hates Africa. He's a black man. How can you hate Africa? Yes, certain Africans don't like African Americans or black people in America. Africans on the continent of Africa sell each other out. How you think France, Great Britain, all these foreign rulers are allowed to take all the dominant resources out and make their countries prestigious? They only prestigious because of the wealth they steal up out of Africa. The question is proposed today. Is Israel an apartheid state? Is a apartheid like South Africa was when the Dutch and the British ruled South Africa. It was apartheid. Why do we have a constant war between the Israelis and the Palestine people? You say you support Israel, then you support mass murder, genocide, and occupation of a land that is not theirs. When you talk about the ancient Israelites of the biblical prospect that they give you, a book that they tampered with and gave it to you, you don't know nothing, black man and woman. They cut your knowledge off. Then they give you a Bible. The word Bible translate book is Greek. We never spoke in Greek. But they give you a book, and you take this book as a wholehearted evidence and proof of this Jesus factor, this white Jesus factor that still got you captivated on a slave plantation in your mind. You can't move past the Jesus, the white Jesus complex. So when I speak, people think you speak in hate when you do nothing but reveal the truth. The biblical promised land, the biblical promised land led to a political Zion Zionism to establish a Jewish homeland in Palestine. See, when Europeans do things, they do things in advance. They set the stage for things to take fruition. So we got to go way back in history to find out what's going on. During World War I in 1916, the British convinced the Arab leaders or the Arab leaders to revolt against the Ottoman Empire. Keep in mind, the Ottoman Empire had conquered Palestine in 1516 and held it for 402 years to 1918. So when the British came in, they had a fraction, but they didn't have all of Israel. They wanted Israel. So the Palestine people were subjected up under the White Turks' rulership. They conquered them. But when the British came, the British convinced the Palestine people, the Arab people of that region, if they engage in guerrilla warfare and help them dismantle the Ottoman Empire, that the British government would support to establish an independent Arab state. 1920, 1947, the British Empire played a major role in the region. In 1917, Lord Arthur Balfour, a British foreign minister, issued a declaration that the British would support a Jewish homeland in Palestine, not an Arab. Palestine, not an Arab land. The British tricked them way back then. So, in November 1947, the overwhelming recommendation partition by the UN was to create what you know is a Jewish state. The United States accepted the UN plan, aggressively promoted this to start this migration up out of what you call Europe. I told you the Jews are not who they say they are, the white Jews that's in Israel. And this is not being anti-Semitic. This is the history. They came from where? Europe. They're not native to that land. But the Israelites of the Bible or the biblical are talking about the black man, the black woman who lived in what they call Israel today. You feel what I'm saying? We know that that particular region in ancient times probably wasn't named Israel. The white man went around the world naming things the Middle East. All that's part of Africa. Israel is on the tectonic plates with Africa. You talking about the Gaza Strip. You talking about near Egypt. Come on, man. That's all Africa. So these white Jews is trying to be the biblical people of the Bible. This is why the biblical promised land led to a political Zionism to establish a Jewish homeland, a political move. You see what I'm saying? So, with that being said, black family, when I said what I said about me not supporting and standing with, not Palestine, but with Israel, because the things that Israel have done to black people. And I showed you in the video. Listen, it's so deep. This is where things get sticky. By mid-November 1947, the Truman administration was firmly in the Zionist camp when the State Department and U.S. mission to the United Nations agreed that the partition resolution should be changed to from a Jewish to a Palestine state. Truman sided with Jewish agencies. See, some people were trying to have a resolution back then, but no. Truman sided with the Jewish agency, the main Zionist organization. The United States also voted against the UN resolution calling on members to accept the Jewish refugees who could not be repatriated. You know what the word means, repatriated? That you cannot go back to the land of the origin in which you come from. They can't go back to Europe. That's where they come from. They're not native to the land. That's all I'm trying to say. That don't make me anti-Semitic. It makes me tell the truth. So when you say you stand with Israel, just think about what you are standing with. A lot of murder and mayhem. When the British took over what is called Israel, the British killed thousands and thousands of Arab people to get this land. They was not there. The Jews was not there. They trying to be biblical. They use that Bible. See, religion is dangerous. They use that Bible as a tool. The Bible's always been used as a tool. I was talking to a Muslim brother yesterday. He did not know that Islam was used as a tool to undermine Africa. And he's so brainwashed, he said that Africans needed to be subjected to the sword. Because if you didn't accept Islam, they gave you the sword. Chop your neck off. But the Quran said that Allah made Muslim. No man can make you a Muslim. According to the Quran, Allah makes Muslim. And during the time of Prophet Muhammad, you do not read in the time of Prophet Muhammad killing people because they were Christians or they believe in voodoo. Reading the history of the Quran, when Muhammad of 1400 years ago, when he was on a run from his people who was trying to kill him for trying to spread out Islam and Mecca, he ran to Abyssinia. Ethiopians was already Christianized. He ran to them and they gave him protection. He didn't kill them. He didn't get on the sword. So where all this terrorism come in at, if you ain't a Muslim, I got to chop your motherfucking head off. And when the book states that Allah makes Muslims, you feel what I'm saying? So I'm just letting you know I know a little bit about the religion. I studied up under religion. I studied up under Christianity, insanity. Studied some of the Hebrew Israelite material. It's just division. When you start dealing with religion, it's division. Black folks can't come together like you got the Chinese who come together. The British come together. White folks come together. Black people can't come together. We clumsy because we dealing with religion. You see what I'm saying? Which these Europeans, Jews hide behind religion, Judaism, to commit evils around the planet. They own every entity known to man. These people cannot be repatriated. They can't be repatriated. They can't be sent back to their origin. So what goes on? You got Hamas. You got all these different groups that they call terrorists. But why are these people created? Something happened back in the day. Their land was confiscated. So they live in poverty. Y'all know that, right? They live in apartheid. So you got to look at America and Israel. Here's a state. They create this vacuum of what you call terrorism. I do not condone what's happening in Israel with the murder on both sides. So don't try to confuse my channel like I'm inciting riots. That I'm siding with I'm not siding with either one of these people because they enemies to black people. Arabs are enemies to black people. The so-called Jews are enemies to black people. They both enslaved us with the same old method, religion. Niggas, leave religion alone. Let's come together. Make religion something personal that you pray, whatever how you worship. But let's come together. Leave that damn religion at home some damn where. We got to get on that battlefield. We got to get liberated. Check this video out.
On November 2nd, 1917, Britain's Foreign Secretary Arthur Balfour wrote a letter that would set off a conflict still being fought more than 100 years later.
His Majesty's government view with favour the establishment in Palestine of a national home for the Jewish people and will use their best endeavours to facilitate the achievement of this object.
When Balfour wrote of his government's intent to create a Jewish homeland in Palestine, 90% of the people living there were not Jewish. Just 31 years later, most of them were gone.
כמה אתה חושב אנשים הרגת ככה?
לא ספרתי. אני לא יכול לדעת בחיי. היה לי מקלע עם 250 כדורים.
This is the story of the British promise that led to the destruction of Palestine and the creation of the State of Israel. Let's start with the obvious question. Why were the British making promises about other people's countries? Short answer, empire is one hell of a drug. This was World War I, and the British were making lots of promises. In addition to promising a Jewish homeland in Palestine, they promised Arab leaders independence if they rose up against Britain's enemy, the Ottoman Empire. The Arabs did. Hollywood even made a movie about it.
Arabia's for the Arabs now. That's what I've told them anyway. That's what they think. That's why they're fighting.
Oh, surely.
A month after Balfour's letter, British troops took Palestine, ending 400 years of Ottoman rule. The people who lived there were Arabs, mostly Muslims, but there were Christian and Jewish minorities too. There was also a tiny number of European Jews who in the late 1800s had started building small colonies there. At a time when many Jews were suffering horrific persecution in Europe, they felt Palestine could be an escape. The idea of building up a Jewish presence in Palestine became known as Zionism, but it stayed a fringe movement among European Jews. Many of them felt they shouldn't have to leave their countries to avoid persecution. But Zionism as a political movement took a big step forward with an Austrian man called Theodor Herzl. And this guy is a very important name in this story. In 1896, he published Der Judenstaat, or in English, The Jewish State. In it, he said the only way for Jews to avoid Europe's anti-Semitism was not just to leave, but to have their own country. And Herzl didn't just write. The next year, he organized a conference in Basel, Switzerland, the first Zionist Congress. The attendees agreed on a program which sought, among other things, to establish a Jewish homeland in Palestine and promote Jewish settlement in Palestine. From here on out, the Zionist movement became very active, setting up funds to promote Jewish immigration to Palestine, companies to buy land there, and recruiting representatives to advocate for their cause with different governments. A few days after the conference, Herzl wrote this in his diary.
At Basel, I founded the Jewish state. In 5 years perhaps, and certainly in 50 years, everyone will perceive it.
He was only off by 1 year. Okay, so that is a lot of history, but it's important because the Zionist movement is a critical part of the story going forward, especially after it found a friend in the British government, where a lot of high-ranking officials supported Zionism, sometimes for unexpected reasons. Prime Minister Lloyd George, for example, was a Christian zealot who believed gathering the Jewish people in Palestine would bring Jesus Christ back to earth. Others, like Balfour, believed that getting the Jewish people out of Europe and into their own country would be a good thing. Herzl was pretty visionary when he wrote that the anti-Semitic nations will become our allies. Meanwhile, the Zionists assured Britain that their future country would be a reliable ally. So that's the backstory of how European anti-Semitism, Zionism, and British imperialism all led to the Balfour Declaration, this British promise to build a homeland for Jews in Palestine. Now we're going to look at how Britain did that. World War I had been a conflict between rival empires, and the winners set up the League of Nations to distribute the losing side's territories between them. They called it the Mandate System, putting territories once controlled by the Ottoman and German empires under the, quote, tutelage of advanced nations until they became independent. Britain was given the mandate over Palestine, but the Palestinian people were never asked what they wanted or what independence would look like to them. Listen to what Balfour wrote to one of his colleagues.
For in Palestine we do not propose even to go through the form of consulting the wishes of the present inhabitants of the country.
Instead, it was the Zionists who were consulted about what their vision for Palestine was, and so the mandate ended up incorporating not just the Balfour Declaration, but several clauses requiring Britain to ensure the establishment of a Jewish home in Palestine. British rule was very accommodating to the Zionist project. The Jewish community in Palestine grew with big waves of immigration. They had their own schools and factories and even their own militia, the Haganah, and they were led by the Polish-born David Ben-Gurion, the leader of their representative body, the Jewish Agency. To the Palestinians, it was clear that Britain wasn't delivering them independence. It was delivering their country to other people. In 1936, they went on strike. British forces tried to break the strike with arrests, torture, mass punishment, and executions. Leaders were exiled, weapons confiscated, and houses blown up. Palestinian fighters attacked British and Jewish targets, while British and Haganah forces would carry out joint raids on Palestinian villages. Something had to change. The British government sent a commission called the Peel Commission to figure it out, but their proposed solution was typical. Just draw another British line on the map, divide the country, give this part to the Jews and this part to the Palestinians, and make that part of Transjordan next door. Oh, and because the Palestinians were a majority in the country, 250,000 of them would have to be removed by force to make the Jewish state viable. Remember, these were the proposals that were meant to calm things down. Spoiler, they didn't. Instead, the revolt continued until 1939, by which time about 10% of Palestine's adult male population had either been killed, injured, arrested, or exiled. The British government really needed a solution. So, here comes another report.
The Commission is studying the 20-year-old Jewish settlements in British-mandated Palestine.
The 1939 White Paper created a conflict between the British and the Zionists for the first time, because it rejected partition and said the solution was for Palestine to gain independence within 10 years, with everyone living there sharing it together. Crucially, it also imposed severe limits on Jewish land purchases and immigration. To the Zionists, this felt like a betrayal. In response, some set off bombs across the country, killing dozens of Palestinians. But soon, everyone was distracted by something much bigger. More than 60 million people were killed in World War II, including 6 million Jews murdered in Nazi death camps. Jewish survivors fled Europe, with a large number of them trying to find safety in Palestine despite the British limit on Jewish immigration. This set off a more direct confrontation between the Zionists and the British, with Palestinians often targeted as well. The Zionists knew two things. Militarily, they were stronger than the Palestinians, and Britain was exhausted by World War II, so it wouldn't have the stomach to keep fighting in Palestine. They were right. In 1947, after 30 years of occupation, Britain announced it was quitting Palestine and asked the newly formed United Nations to clean up its mess. Alright, 1947 and 1948 are the most pivotal years in this story, so let's take a look at how things are lining up. During British rule, Jews had gone from 10% to 30% of the population, and owned about 6% of the land. Under Ben-Gurion's leadership, the Jewish Agency was pretty much functioning as a government for the Jewish community. And the Zionist militias had tens of thousands of soldiers, modern weapons, and officers who'd already fought in World War II. On the other side, the Palestinians hadn't been allowed to develop their own administration or military. But as they waited for the UN solution, they were still the majority all over the country. In November 1947, the UN, then only made up of a fraction of the world's countries, voted to partition Palestine. This plan marked off 55% of the country for a Jewish state, but the UN never explained how it could be a Jewish state when half the people in its territory were Palestinian. To nobody's surprise, Palestinians, and in fact all Arabs, rejected the UN's plan. Ben-Gurion and the Zionist leadership accepted, but they saw an opportunity. With the British on the way out, the Zionists knew they would have the strongest military in Palestine. Their forces were instructed to seize more territory than they'd been awarded by the UN, and to do what was necessary to reduce the number of Palestinians in it. In cities like Haifa, the militia set off car bombs in Palestinian neighborhoods. They attacked villages and forced residents out.
Haganah troops have driven the Arabs out of the beleaguered city, taking many prisoners.
After inspecting parts of western Jerusalem that had been emptied of Palestinians, Ben-Gurion said,
"In many Arab neighborhoods in the West, you do not see even one Arab. If we persist, it is quite possible that in the next 6 or 8 months there will be considerable changes in the country, and to our advantage."
One of the events that helped speed up these changes took place on April 9th, 1948, when the village of Deir Yassin was attacked. A British government report to the United Nations describes the scene. 250 people were killed in circumstances of great savagery. Women and children were stripped, lined up, photographed, and then slaughtered by automatic firing. The story of what happened at Deir Yassin set off panic all over the country. As news spread, people fled, fearing they would be next. Historians have recorded dozens of similar massacres during this period. Each time, they would result in entire communities fleeing.
תמיד הייתה הוראה, והייתה הוראה של בן גוריון, לגרש את האנשים משם. כבשנו את המקום, טרקטורים חרשו את המקום. חרשו. לא נשאר זכר של כפר. למה? לא רצו שתהיה, לא חזרה ולא זכר של המקום.
By the time Britain ended its mandate on May 15th, 1948, 250,000 Palestinians had fled. The night before, David Ben-Gurion announced the founding of the State of Israel, with himself as its first prime minister. He was standing under a giant portrait of Herzl, 51 years after Herzl had predicted this very moment. The Zionist militias came together as the newly formed Israel Defense Forces, but the fighting wasn't over. With the British out of the way, soldiers from several Arab countries entered Palestine. But the Israeli army was better equipped, better organized, and unlike the Arab armies, had a unified command and backing from several European countries. Israeli forces pushed into places that the UN had assigned to the Palestinian state, like the towns of Lidda and Ramle. 50,000 people were forced to flee from there, many on foot, in what became known as the Lidda Death March. After being emptied, the towns were given Hebrew names, Lod and Ramla. Like in many other emptied towns, the buildings and homes were taken over by the new Israeli state and given to Jews. By the time the UN secured an armistice, 3/4 of the Palestinian people had become refugees. In Arabic, they call this the Nakba, literally the catastrophe. The new state of Israel made up 78% of what had been Palestine. The remaining parts were annexed by Jordan or taken over by Egypt. A year later, the UN passed a resolution calling for all Palestinian refugees to be allowed to return home. They never have been. Palestine had been erased. In the decades since, attempts to resolve this conflict have again tried to partition the land. With each successive attempt, the territory offered to Palestinians in their historic homeland shrinks even more. Ironically, Israel is still struggling to maintain the population advantage it gained in 1948 when it forced all those people out, because in 1967 it occupied the West Bank and Gaza, bringing all the Palestinians living there under its rule. And so today, the population of Jews and non-Jews in this land is roughly equal. But those living under occupation have no rights, no citizenship, and no prospect of independence. The Nakba-era tactics of settlement, home demolitions, and expulsion are still used against them.
Nakba, Nakba, no! We want Nakba, Nakba, no!
Israel has taken the land but wants nothing to do with the millions under its rule. International, Israeli, and Palestinian human rights groups say this system is a form of apartheid. To see if that's an accurate description of Israel more than 100 years after Balfour's promise,
I was tired of seeing you Negroes talking about you stand with Israel during this crisis. I don't support no one being killed. But how can you stand with someone who don't stand with black people? I don't understand the psychology of the Negro, the self-hatred Negro. You feel what I'm saying? The state of Israel was proclaimed on May 14, 1948. It became a state. No more was the Palestine people would be able to enjoy the land, their origin, where they inhabited, because they have a foreigner who has taken over the land. While the Jewish people were successful creating their homeland, there was no Palestine and no internalization of Jerusalem either. In 1948, for example, the Palestinian people were driven out of New Israel into refugee camps in Jordan, Egypt, Lebanon, and other regions. At least 7,500,000 people said to have been driven out. Ethnic cleanse, or some have described it. They was killing the Jewish and the British people, killed off the Palestinian people. And you Negroes say you stand with a people origin who came from out of Europe. They try to say they migrated from Africa. That's what that is. Palestine. They migrated up out of Palestine into Europe, and they started to be persecuted. You know who migrated out of what they call Palestine? The black Israelites. You feel what I'm saying? So these people hide behind the cloak of religion, and they be behind some of the major mayhems around the planet. They own the banks. Who you think run the IMF? Who you think who print the money? America, she don't print her money. Her money is printed by the untouchables. We're not blaming the Jewish citizens. They should not suffer for what the heads of state done back in history to give this resentment against the Jewish people of today who is ruling Israel like apartheid. Those people are oppressed. The Palestinian people are oppressed. But you stand. You stand, Negro. with the people who will never stand for us. They don't stand for us. They don't stand for us. Why should I stand with the people who never stood for black people? You see how they deport black people out of Israel. They don't like black people. They never did like black people. So I never stand with my oppressor. They participated in the enslavement of my people. They have persecuted my people. They murdered my people. Yes, your God's people, the so-called God's people. They're supposed to be God's people, but they hate black people. They God people. They can commit all the heinous crimes around the world, then hide behind the religion, Judaism, and scream victim. And they say black people play the victim. I dare them to say we play the victim when we are the victim. But these people commit mass murder and hide behind religion and play the victim role, anti-Semitic. Call you anti-Semitic for telling the truth. The race card, when they know they white, just like they white brother, the Nazis. I don't know why the Nazis mad at y'all. Yeah, because y'all one fraction of white people who try to take over the world. Y'all did take over the world. The white Nazis felt some type of way, trying to stop y'all from taking over the world. That's y'all brother. Yo, that's what that war was about. You know, what white fraction gonna take over the world? You know what I'm saying? So, when the UN resolution came down in favor of this Jewish state, the Palestine people wasn't even thought about, just like the 1984-85 Berlin Conference, when all the European countries came together and carved up Africa, and not one African was there. So at the UN resolution, no one was at the UN speaking for the Palestine people. They already had their mind made up to make it a Jewish state. The United States accepted the UN's plan. It aggressively promoted it among other members of the UN. President Harry Truman, he was personally moved by the tragedy that the Jews have been through, the condition of being refugees. He studied the biblical scripture and made it up on the argument that the Jews' migration to Palestine was the proper remedy for survival of the Jews of Europe. He was aware of the Arabs or the Arabs' hostility to the Jewish settlers, because that's what they are, settlers. They took the prophecy of the biblical scripture that was for the Israelites. That's the difference between the Israeli and the Israelite. The Israeli is the conqueror. The Israelite is the homeland of the people. You feel what I'm saying? So, you know, it's crazy, you know, because the UN, this is how they make things complicated in the Middle East, or what they call Israel. The Arabs would get 43% of the land, but the Jewish people got 57% of the good land. So in 1947, the UN voted overwhelmingly to recommend a partition of Palestine into a Jewish state. But the minority Jewish people would receive majority of the land. How is that fair? But black people, you be careful. I saw your TikTok video black woman, sister, you gravely misinformed. Do your research before you make a TikTok video trying to warn us not to speak out against the state of Israel when it's terrorism from the hands of Israel also. We don't even know if Israel behind Hamas to give them authority, as they say they have, or an excuse to go wipe Palestine off of the planet. Because these people, wicked people, stage inside jobs. 9/11. The recent burning of Hawaii. We talking about HARP. The recent staging of earthquakes in Haiti and floods in New York. Yeah, the wicked be behind a lot of wickedness. But you can hide behind religion. Peace and black power.